the ballots till after Election Day. So we're going to have an approximate idea on November 5th. It's probably going to take a few more days after that. But right now, if I were sort of betting on this race, I would say slight advantage to Donald Trump to probably win the Electoral College, Kamala Harris to win the popular vote.
So the US election is just 10 days out, and many are saying this is as close as it can get. Less than a point separates Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But new polls just in the last few hours, just in the last couple of days or so, has seemingly suggested that Donald Trump is now beating Kamala Harris even on the popular vote. Up until this week, Kamala Harris was leading in the popular vote, but she had a tough time in the battleground states or the swing states, which ultimately will decide who becomes the next president. But now, new polling is showing that Donald Trump is edging past Kamala Harris even in the popular vote. Now, what that means is that if that is true, if these polls hold, it shows that Donald Trump is the one who has momentum going into Election Day. You want to be the candidate who has momentum going into Election Day. And more importantly, because of the inherent bias in the Electoral College system, which the Democrats say does not favor them, which means that if Trump is ahead on the popular vote, then in the Electoral College, we are potentially looking at an electoral landslide. But let's try and make sense of this from both sides of the divide, as it were. First, I want to go across to Mr. David Schultz. He's an American pollster. Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. First things first, everyone wants to know, and obviously there's a huge amount of interest here in India and around the world as far as the US presidential election is concerned. Why is this race so close? They're saying it's the closest election perhaps since Bush v. Gore, and that was 25 years ago. Why has this election become so close?
Well, the election has become so close because America is so politically divided at this point. Had we gone back 2 years ago, right after our midterm elections, back when it was still Trump versus Biden, the election was very, very close. And except for that brief period of time in June after the Trump-Biden debate, and up until, let's say, just a few weeks ago, it's been more or less an incredibly stable electorate and stable in the polls for the last 2 years because we are just so divided. We are so polarized, and the partisanship in terms of, again, party loyalty of who people are going to vote for is so rigid at this point. And that explains it really at this point, really in the United States. We are a divided country that remains divided, and there's almost nobody who's really undecided at this point in this election for a period of a long time. And what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks is that this election is going to come down to probably less about changing people's opinions about who to vote for and more about whether certain people show up to vote.
So tell me, Mr. Schultz, just in the last couple of weeks or so, polls are showing that whatever gap there was between Trump and Harris, Trump is managing to close that gap. It was under 1% at the start of this week, and now we have new polling which shows that Trump is ahead on the popular vote. When it was about a month or so back, right after the debate, and it was a good debate for Harris, she was leading on average in most of the polls, at least in the popular vote, by above 2 percentage points. But the fact that Trump has managed to close that gap, do you reckon that that is indicative of anything? Do you reckon that that shows that Trump is the one who has momentum? He's the guy who's got tailwind behind him going into these last 10 days or so. Does that change anything at all? How big a factor is that on Election Day itself?
It potentially has an impact. But again, remember, we need to focus on the fact that we don't elect the president of the United States by the straight popular vote or national popular vote. It's really by the Electoral College. And what this election's really coming down to is, as I've been arguing for months, it's about what 150,000 to 200,000 voters are going to do in about 6 or 7 states in the United States. And what we mean by states, this election is going to come down to voters in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina. So the real question is there momentum for Trump versus Harris in those critical swing states? And in those critical swing states, the election does seem to be dead even, perhaps maybe at this point a little bit of momentum shifting towards Trump. But what we're going to look at in these next 2 weeks is really to the extent to which both candidates are going to work hard on just getting out their base, getting out their supporters. And really, this election will be determined by which of the two sides is better at mobilizing their base. And if the shift in opinion is potentially an indication of, let's say, the enthusiasm factor for a candidate, perhaps Trump has an edge. And that's where I am at right now. When I look at the numbers, when I look at the polling data, I think it's a slight advantage to Trump right now.
So tell me, if you're saying that all of this is boiling down to who turns out the base on election day, then why is there so much time and money spent by the campaigns and the candidates on what they call the undecideds? It's almost like the undecideds decide this election.
Well, the undecided ones are probably not truly undecided. And what I mean by that, they're not saying, am I going to vote for Trump versus Harris? There's an incredibly small number of those people who are out there. What we're really looking at are voters now. Are they going to show up to vote or not show up to vote? That's how I'm really sort of classifying the undecideds. And so, yes, Trump and Harris are trying to locate those few that out there that are
against the forces in the region on regime in Iran. In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the State of Israel, right now, the Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October 7th on 7 fronts, including direct attacks from Iranian soil. Like every other sovereign country in the world, the State of Israel has the right and the duty to respond. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the State of Israel and the people of Israel. In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the State of Israel, right now, the Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October 7th on 7 fronts, including direct attacks from Iranian soil. Like every other sovereign country in the world, the State of Israel has the right and the duty to respond. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the State of Israel and the people of Israel. In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the State of Israel, right now, the Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October